felt like he never experienced that ever again as a recruiter. But I was making it known to him that he didn't have to fluff anything up. So he finished the paperwork, and he and I spent about 45 minutes thereafter talking about basically everything that would happen from that moment on all the way through basically your whole Army career if you wanted to choose to make it a career. And I felt really, really good about what that conversation was. And he gave me, of course, the general paperwork you get as a recruit and someone applicant. And that was a big change for me, because now I'd spent the last several years after my baseball career basically just kind of floundering around, and now I've got this possible brand new dream that could be. So I kind of like the idea of Cav Scout, and which is, if you're not familiar with that MOS, if you're from a different branch, it's 19 Delta, and it's a reconnaissance MOS. It's in combat arms, so there's a lot of infantry-esque qualities and abilities with that particular MOS, but your job is not there to be an individual ground pounder where you're taking the direct fight to the enemy. You're there to get intel and so on and so forth on the enemy and its movements and report it back. And there was just something about that was just very invigorating to me that I thought would be a very good thing. So that's what I kind of first had my heart on. Excuse me. And so that was what my goal was. And then over the next several months, was a lot of, up and just like, I mean, pretty much everybody who's joined the military has something with their story that's going to represent or resonate here. That there was a lot of ups and downs, and one of the drawbacks that I had was I had quit high school and had to get a GED. So I had to overcome that, and you had to score a little bit higher score on the ASVAB. And I'm traditionally not one who does I don't do well on standardized tests. And I have ADD, and there's some challenges there, but I had the practice ASVABs I was scoring like in the 70s, and I think one even got me in like 80 or 81. So there was really no fear that I would not score the needed 50 for a GED applicant. But the two times that I took it, I didn't score over a 50. The first time I scored a 40, and the second time I scored a 43. And that was, it was very, very disappointing. And I knew I was coming up on the last time I could take it. And I'd been studying, I'd bought a practice book. And so over this next, basically this whole next full year, I'm basically just studying my behind off on trying to get the ASVAB to where I could score over 50. So the recruiter calls me up and he said, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you to join the Army Reserves in a local military police battalion in Tallahassee." And they had 2 different spots for 2 different MOSs, so 4 spots total, 2 for MP and 2 for a human resources spot. Well, I wanted one of the MP slots. Well, that didn't really work out whenever I got to MEPS, but I could still join as a human resources soldier. So that was ultimately the route that I took to get into the United States military. And so I go to Fort Jackson. This was early November 2004. And by this point in time, I'm 26. And definitely one of the older recruits that's in Fort Jackson basic training for my company. I think we had a couple that was in their 30s prior service. And then there was like one guy that was 40. He was in the first Gulf War as a Marine prior service, and he came back in, I think like the Guard or something. and of Washington State. But so I think his name was Mason. But anyway, so basic and AIT for me individually really wasn't a big challenge. I went in with a particular mindset that this is what I need to do and I have to do to restart my life. I didn't give drill sergeants any real cause to ever look at me. I wasn't a discipline problem by no means. The hardest thing for me was dealing with all of these 18 to 22-year-olds who thought, just by their presence that they were General Patton, and they were going to somehow save the world. And that was really the hardest part. You're definitely dealing with an alpha infused mindset, and which is all fine. So you have those kind of challenges, but really basic wasn't very difficult for me. AIT I really didn't care for because it was a much slower environment. We were, sitting down most of the day in class. I didn't really care for that. But basic was pretty good. Really enjoyed the bayonet assault course. Enjoyed the bivouacking. Enjoyed the field exercise. But it was really just a very, very good, positive time in my life. And so we graduate. We had Christmas Exodus 2003, come back in 2004 to finish up basic. Graduated, I think it was the 29th of January 2004. I think I mentioned earlier about when I went to basic was 2003, not 2004. But nevertheless, so basic, graduate, basic training, stayed at Fort Jackson for AIT. Again, I really didn't care for it. There was some fun elements to it, some craziness that took place on our first off-post weekend that I'm not going to get into in this podcast. But just, it's safe to say there was some interesting things that took place. So whenever I graduated the AIT portion of my career, went to the reserves there in Tallahassee. It was an MP battalion. Like I said, it was, pretty laid back for the most part. Went to the range a couple times. Went to field exercise at Camp Blanding. That was pretty cool. I really enjoyed it. It was, of course, my first experience with the military outside of a TRADOC environment. Kind of saw a little bit more how the military environment really is outside of that environment. Enjoyed it, liked it. Started to really strongly consider going active duty pretty early on, but the allure of still staying at home with all my friends, just like, a lot of people in this situation, was definitely something that was kind of keeping me there. I was working with a local high school football team that I really enjoyed, kind of fell in love with coaching football, and thought that might be the career I want to take, was coaching football. But I was still in the Army, and I needed still more structure, and ended up going active duty after a long period of time. One other push-pull factor was it was hard to really